This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Anyone, any questions till here? So we were looking at, let's say, the access management and storage account yesterday in deep dive. We were understanding what kind of roles that you have and how can you assign these roles and all these things out here as such. So yes, anyone, any questions till here?
Hello.
Good, please.
Oh, sorry. Actually, I didn't attend the last two classes. So actually, I just had a small confusion. So why are we using this Azure Microsoft Explorer?
Why are we using this Microsoft Explorer for a better data management? Meaning in a container, right? So in the portal view, it's a little bit difficult to handle the data. When I say a little bit difficult to handle the data, I cannot just go ahead and let's say upload the entire folder, or I rather cannot let's say go ahead and if I have let's say hundreds and hundreds of containers, I'll have to keep parallelly be switching to let's say multiple containers out here frequently, and I'll have to let's say do the data management out here. So Storage Explorer is a one-stop solution, is a one-stop data management solution out here that you get, which is let's say a unified portal where you can just log in into directly your storage accounts, handle a lot of containers. You can have multiple containers let's say side by side, and let's say migrate the data and let's say do a lot of things out here as such. And also you can upload multiple folders at one go, and when you upload let's say a file or a folder using a Storage Explorer, the copy is generally fast. The copy is generally faster out there because it has a backend running algorithm and a lot of things out here as such. So multiple advantages that you get using a Storage Explorer out here as such.
Okay, sir.
Okay, any more questions, guys? Okay, let's look at one thing today. Let's upload a couple of more blobs out here. And let's say 6, 7, 8, 9, something like this. Okay. So multiple blobs, and I'm uploading all the multiple blobs out here as such. Can anyone tell me what is the access tier in which the blobs are sitting in? What is the access tier the blobs are actually sitting in?
Hot.
Hot.
Yes.
Where do you see that?
Access tier. That's
You see access tier? Do you see anywhere in the screen?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes. Access tier is what? Hot out here. What does this mean? What does it mean for a blob to be sitting in a hot access tier?
Frequently
Frequently
used data.
used. Frequently used. Correct. Which means it's a very frequently used data out here. Let me put it in that way. Saying hot meaning frequently used, which means if a blob is sitting in hot, the cost per a transaction. When I say transaction, it can either be a read or a write operation out here. The cost per a transaction is less. When you let's say write on the data, when you modify the data, or when you read the data, the cost that Microsoft gives you here is very less. But the cost per GB of storage is high. That's what happens. So if you go into the pricing calculator once again, Azure price calculator, go into the pricing calculator out here. I think I have a storage account already. I think I have a storage account already out here. This is the storage account that we added a couple of days ago. So let's say this is sitting in, let's say something like ECS2. It's setting block storage, standard general purpose V2. Access tier is hot, and redundancy is LRS. This is the standard procedure I'm going with. And for 500 GB of storage, I'm getting a cost of about what? 852 rupees per a month, which means for 1 GB of data, it's around 1.70 rupees out here as such. This is the cost when you store it in hot. But if you see write operations, whenever you write it, And if you are doing, let's say, 10,000 operations, it's about 4 rupees for 10,000 operations out here. They're calculating an approximate value of 10 into 10,000, which mean by 1 lakh operations out here. Meaning if you put one operation here, 4 rupees. If you put, let's say, 100 operations like this. So this is calculated in a bulk. Calculated in a bulk out here as such. So these operations out here, again, to list the container, there is a cost. To read operations, there is a cost. Data retrieval, there is a cost. There's a cost associated with everything out here as such. In a hot, cost per transaction is less, cost per GB of storage is very high out here. Now, if I switch it to cool, let's see what is going to happen. Now, 500 GB of data, it was around what? 800 rupees. Now, 622 rupees, which means for 5000 GB of data, if I put this in hot, 8000 rupees. Cost is higher, but let's see this. Cost per a read operation or per a write operation. Isn't this higher? This is higher out here. That's what I was telling. Is that in a cool tier, which is less frequently used. The numbers get in an opposite mode. Cost per a transaction or cost per a transaction or read write is high. This is less. Microsoft also gives you a third option out here when you are, let's say, looking at a blob. It's called archive. Only for storage. Just for storing. You don't want to access it. You don't want to do anything with that. Just for storing your data. If you put this into something called as an archive tier, let's see the cost that is associated. So 5000 GB of data earlier, it was what? 6000 rupees something? 405 rupees. What is the cost cutting? Almost 90-95% you're cutting down the cost. If you're putting the data in archive, that's what you have the option out here also. Is that if, let's say, I am a newspaper agency. I'm a newspaper company called Hindu.com. Hindu is a popular newspaper website out here. What the newspaper company is doing is that they are taking a container called test container 1 and they are putting all the PDF files here of daily newspapers. So when you or as a user go to Hindu.com, it comes to the backend container, gets you the PDF file, sends you the PDF file across. That is a standard delivery mechanism. So I'm going to that particular Hindu.com website. That's going to a backend storage account. That backend storage account is going inside a container. Seeing what is your query, meaning you're asking for today's newspaper, it will go to today's date, take that newspaper, give it to you so that you can read the same thing out here as such. Now, this newspaper is telling me that you or this company, let's say that you are a DevOps engineer or an administrator for this company, working for this company. Let's say that all their data is hosted on the Azure cloud. So they are telling that, you know what, this file, which is today's newspaper, what I observe or what as a company I observe is that after 30 days, no one is nearly interested in going back, let's say, to today's newspaper and reading it. It's very unlikely that people are reading back 30 days and etc. So this becomes less frequently used. So now my company is telling after 30 days, meaning which is today is 10th of October, 10th of November, come here, change it to what? Cool. Change to put into cool. Archive will come to that. We'll come to that point also. So I can select this blob. I can say change tier. And once I hit the change tier button, it's telling me it's hot. I can put it to cool. Done. Access here is changed to cool. Same way, this is tomorrow's newspaper. Let's say imagine 11th of November or 11th of October. 11th of November, you should come here. Change this to what? Cool. This is what they are now telling is that, you know what? Every 30 days, today's newspaper will become old. Put it to cool. This one, manual changing. Manual changing. Manually, but again, as you pointed out, there might be thousands and thousands of newspapers. To identify each and every date, changing it to cool, very difficult. That's the reason we look to automate it. So we'll also see the automation option. But before going to automation, always the suggestion is we'll understand how this happens manually, so that we know what is happening in automation out here as such. So I'm coming here into each and every blob, saying this is cool, and etc. I'm changing this out here. Let's say that this newspaper company is telling me that, you know what, even in cool, I still have to pay some cost for storage. I still have to pay the cost for storage, because in hot, I was paying 800 rupees for 500 GB of data. In cool, I'm paying 600 rupees for the data. Now the company is telling me I want to completely avoid the cost. Let's say after 3 months, this newspaper is not even being touched. No one is actually touching this newspaper. Let's say 3 months, 90 days, right? So now the newspaper company is telling that today is 1st October, November, December, January. January 10th, I want this newspaper to be going into archive. I don't even want to, let's say, touch this data. I want to move this into archive. So I'll come here, I'll say changed here into what? Archive. Very importantly, what is the difference between data that is sitting in cool and archive? Let's see that. I'll say save. I have two things. One is cool, one is archive. Let's understand this. So what I'll do firstly is I'll change the access level to container so that I can simply take the URL of the blob and interact with that. Let's take this. This is the data. I'll copy this out. Able to access it. Container access level working. Let's go to sample one. Let's take the same URL. Not available. Why? Archive. Exactly. It's in an archive tier. If the blob is sitting in an archive tier, you cannot access it until you change it back, or you change it back to hot or cool. You get it back to hot or cool. This is called as a process of rehydration. We call this as rehydrating a blob out here as such, or rehydration of a blob, which means a blob in an archive tier is not, or you cannot access a blob in the archive tier out here as such. If you want to rehydrate it to hot or cool, there is there is something known as a rehydration priority, meaning how soon you want the data here. Depending upon the size of the data, if I say save right now, now do you see it's still in archive, rehydration pending to hot? You will have a cost here. You will have a cost that is associated here. That's the reason. Go to a bank, any bank out here. Say that, you know what, I need a banking transaction statement of 5 years ago. They'll tell you, you know what, we need some time. You need to give us some time, 24 hours or something. After that, you'll also be charged somewhere around 100, rupees, something like that. That is a charge what the bank actually pays to the cloud provider directly, because this process of rehydration is costly. The process of rehydrating a blob from from archive into hot or cool is actually costly. And why do you need to rehydrate it? So the blob can be available. In a rehydration, right, you cannot, or when the blob is sitting in archive, you cannot really download it, or you cannot really interact with it. So if you have to do that, you have to first switch it back to, let's say, something like hot or cool, and then start, let's say, working around with that as out there as such. Is any questions still here?
So is there a cost for listing also, listing the blobs?
Yes, there is a cost for listing also. Yes, there is a cost for listing. Listing operation, there is a cost. List the containers, list the blobs. There is a cost that is associated with it. Yes.
So it's an expensive, right? I mean, even if you list it also, there is a cost.
Yes, if you're listing it, you're doing an operation. You're sending a request out there to Azure. So yes, it is expensive. It is expensive, and that's the reason you'll have to carefully plan on what exactly that you want to do. Whether you want to, let's say, just store the blobs, or you want to, let's say, list your containers and what exactly you want to do. Yes, this is a cost associated operation out there, and the cost is around 40 rupees if you list it for 1 lakh operations. Meaning, if you try to list it 1 lakh times, you're paying around 40 rupees out there. Do you think this cost will actually matter to a company? This is actually peanuts for a company.
No, I mean, if there are too many number of blobs, right, and
Right.
transactions
If
happening
they are,
very frequently,
that's true. If there are many number of blobs that your business is actually using, you're actually even driving equal amount of revenue from that, isn't it? That's the cost, or that's the let's say cost calculation what Microsoft does in the background.
No, read and write, understand, but listing is also is something weird. Okay.
Listing itself is a read operation again. If you're trying to read, first you'll have to list. Listing itself is a read operation. Exactly. Listing itself is a read operation out here.
No, listing is the you need to list the number of blobs. I mean, in a container, right? And reading
For
is you are
so
reading the data in the
firstly,
blob.
that's right. Firstly, if you have to list the number of blobs in a container, first you'll have to list your containers.
Yeah, correct,
After
correct,
then you go ahead, list the number of blobs inside your container, and then you read it.
correct.
So
I mean, both
always, yes,
no, two different operations, but read implicitly has the list operation, right?
read implicitly has a list operation. No, not really. Read doesn't implicitly have a list operation. Again, when you kind of generate a shared access token, right? You have an operation called read and you have an operation called list out there. If read implicitly has list, why do they have a list out here as such? No, read implicitly doesn't mean list. You need and list explicitly out there as such.
Okay. So we are doing so many times. I mean, opening the container, looking at
Mhm,
the blobs, everything is charged.
mhm. Yes, everything is charged. Exactly, everything is charged. And again, you are charged at this particular price out here. When you do a list
Yeah.
operation, this is the price that you are charged at for one list
Based
operation
on
out here.
the
Yeah,
this
again,
also based on the
yes,
region level, right? I think region to region it varies.
region to region, yes, it varies. Meaning the same list operation, let's say in India, would cost you more.
Would cost more. Okay.
It was costing me 4 rupees there. Sorry, it was costing me, let's say, yes. I mean, the cost almost is the same, but yes, the rate at which, let's say, you store or the region specific rates and all these things, they change. Yes, there is a slight change out there as such.
And it also depends on the redundancy level. I mean, the cost also depends on the
Yes,
redundancy.
of course.
It
Cost
is right because it
depends
has to make
heavily upon
multiple
the redundancy
copies.
level. Exactly. It has to make multiple copies. It also has to save the copies, and the replication needs to be synchronous. So yes, you are charged for a package. Storage meaning you're not
And
just charged for the storage. Yes.
and
Hmm?
what is this general purpose V2, V3? I mean, these are all storage tiers, storage
We'll talk
types.
about that. Yes,
Okay.
it's not V3, it's V1, V2, and blob storage. We'll talk about what this is.
Okay. Okay.
Hello, sir.
Good, please.
Sir, in the scenario, cold tier is accessible anytime, sir.
Cold tier is accessible anytime, but please keep in mind that the access cost is higher. When you go to a cold tier, yes, it's accessible anytime, yes, but the cost that is associated is higher out here as such.
Okay. Cold tier, high cost.
Yes, cost of access is high. That's what we talked about, right? Cost per a
Okay,
transaction
okay.
is high, but cost per
Sir,
storage
sir,
is
one
low.
question.
Mhm.
For GB storage entail, sir. What is
I'm
meaning
sorry,
of GB storage?
sorry, what is the cost of? Sorry, what is the?
Previous pictures in the previous picture, sir. Show in
Mhm.
previous picture. Cost per GB of storage means
What do you
For
storage.
understand
one
by this? When I say
for one
cost per
GB.
GB, for 1 GB, what is the cost? So
Okay,
for
okay,
if I
okay,
say
okay,
for
sir. Okay,
1 GB, it is 5 rupees. For 10 GB, it is 5 into 10. That is what I was telling
okay,
out here
okay,
as
sir.
such.
And one
Okay,
last
okay. I
question on
understand.
this, Kiran. On the
Good, please.
archive
Hmm?
data can be accessed directly through the CLI.
Archive data, can you access it directly to CLI? No, you cannot. It has to be rehydrated back. Archive
Okay.
data is only for storage purpose. So it will not let you do a read or write operation on top of it. If you have to do a read or write again, you'll have to rehydrate the blob back to hot or cool.
So that's a manual process, rehydrating it, or will it automatically?
Rehydrating can be done with CLI also. I mean, it can be done with CLI, it can be done with PowerShell, Bash. You can approach multiple things out here as
No,
such.
no, but that's a manual task. Or when let's
It
say
is
if
a
I'm
manual task. Yes.
trying to
Hmm?
access the data in archive, so
Okay.
will it not implicitly convert into cold or hot and
No, it
can get
will not.
access? No, it is not.
No, it will not. It
So
will
there
not
are
implicitly convert it. Yes.
two actions. One, you need to rehydrate, and then you can access.
Then we have to access correct.
Okay.
Again, in hot, you don't rehydrate. hot, there is no concept of rehydration at all. But yes, rehydration cost completely depends upon the size of the data that you're trying to rehydrate out here as such. There should be a rehydration cost also associated out here. Let's see if okay, archival high read priority, archival standard priority is also should be there, something like that. So if I look at that, all operations data retrieval data, right? Yes. So I mean, it normally comes under archival I read priority out here when you're trying to rehydrate it out. It's not explicitly mentioned out here. It's something which is charged by the platform, but I'll see if I can find an article which talks about a rehydration cost out here as such. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Mhm. Yes. When you delete it, so it is always depending upon the volume of data that you have in your storage account, which means today, let's say I have 100 GB of data, I am being charged for 24 hours for 100 GB of data. This is all per hour cost. This is all a per hour cost out here that normally that we calculate out here. So per hour, what is the charge that you incur for, let's say, that particular 100 GB of data? Let's say in the second hour you go and delete everything, just have 1 GB of data, you're only charged for 1 GB of data out here. Calculated, yes, on hours basis on the amount of data that you actually go and let's say charge out here. Again, this pricing calculator is per a month, is per month. This is average per month, but this is divided by 30 and again coming down to per hour. So this is giving you an estimation that in a month this is how you get charged if you are using this amount of data and so on and so forth.
Hi, Kiran.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, at the container level, if he has the access level as a owner,
Mhm.
does he able to open the archive?
In the container level, if you put it as owner, I am an owner
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So here, if you see, my access is itself an owner, meaning my owner access is coming from subscription level. So I'm also an owner at the container level also. Am I able to
Okay,
access this particular blob? No, I'm not, because it's sitting in archive. I'm not
okay,
able to access it. So it doesn't depend upon the RBAC that you have. It depends upon
okay,
the access tier that the blob is actually sitting in.
okay.
Again, see, this is a manual procedure to go ahead and let's say into each and every blob and change it from hot to cool and etc. It will become very difficult for you over a period of time, especially when you have multiple containers on the go. So when you have, let's say, hundreds and hundreds of containers that you're dealing with, it's very difficult to manage the life cycle of a blob. We call this as a life cycle, meaning is it hot, is it archive, is it cool, and etc. For which, if you go at a storage account level, there is something called life cycle management policy. What you can do is that now it's telling you life cycle management policy offers a rich rule based upon say your blobs and etc. I'll say add a rule, and what will I tell is this one. I'll say rule 30 days, meaning after 30 days, if my blobs are not modified, I want them to go into cool. I'll say okay, fine, after 30 please go into cool. I'll say next. That's what it is telling you. If the last modified date or if the created date, you can anyways take this one, either being last modified or either being created. Let's say I put a last modified out here. I'll say if it is more than 30 days, then move the blob to what? Cool storage or archive storage, or you want to delete it, you can delete it. I'll say cool storage, I'll say add, and this adds a rule for me right now, which means whatever I was going ahead and doing manually, this rule is automating that for me, meaning it's going ahead checking all the blobs that are last modified more than 30 days, identifying them, moving them into something like a cool storage account out here. Let's say I had one more rule telling that after 90 days, I want all the blobs to go into, let's say, archive. I can say add a rule. I can add multiple combinations of rules out here. I can say add a rule. I'll say something like archive 90 days, some rule name. I'll say next. And I'll say if the created date is more than 90 days, Then I'll move the data into archive storage. I'll say add. Now I have two different rules out here. You can have multiple rules out here. Such I'll say add one more rule. Let's say after 1 year, 365 days, I want to delete the blob completely. I don't even want the blob. I'll say delete 365. I'll say next. Let's say more than 365 days, delete the blob. I'll say add this out.
So this we are doing at the storage account level, right? Which applies
This
to
we are
all the
doing at the
containers, right?
storage account level. Exactly. This we are
So
doing at the
all
storage
the
account level,
containers.
which means exactly, which means all the containers will follow this. Correct.
But if you want to do for a particular container or a blob,
Yes.
is that option there?
If you want to do for a particular container or a blob, let's talk about container and then let's go into blob. Let's say I want to do it for a specific container only. I don't want to apply it for all the containers. I want to do it for one specific container called test container one. The rule should only apply for this particular container. So what you can do is that you can go into again lifecycle management out here. Let's say lifecycle management, add a rule. Now I'll say rule name is like container rule or something like this. The container rule 30 days. After 30 days, I want the blobs inside this specific container called test container one to go into something known as what? Into a cool storage account out here. I'll say what? Limit blob with filters. I'll add this. Here I had what? Apply rule to all the blobs in your storage account. I don't want to do that. Now do you see when I had this is something base blob and I applied this out. When I put limit blob with filters, I have one more thing called as a filter set that is coming into picture. So let's go there. I'll say 30. I'll say 30 out here. I'll say this something like cool. I'll say next. Now it's asking me, okay, fine. Give me a prefix. Tell me what exactly it is. I'll say test container one. That's it. I'm applying a filter right now. I'll say add. Now this rule is only getting applied to that particular test container one only. Now I have multiple rules. Telling one is rule 30 days applied to all the blobs. One is rule 30 applied to only one container. This rule will take a precedence, meaning this rule will take a priority over this particular rule. It's always first the filter set that gets applied. If that doesn't get applied, only then it will come down to this particular rule out here as such. So now I have, let's say, one particular container called test container. I have only applied a rule on top of this particular container using something called as a filter set. You can also do a granular level. Let's say you only want to apply rules, or you only want to, let's say, apply a rule to that, or only want to apply rules to specific blobs inside the container. Meaning, let's say I have blobs starting with a name called S. I only want to apply, let's say, this rule to all the blobs starting with something called sample. I don't want, let's say, a blob called XYZ. I don't want that to follow this particular rule for n number of reasons. Again, using the same filter set. If let's say I go to lifecycle management out here, using the same filter set again. Right now, the filter set is something like this called test container. If I want to be more specific, I can say test container / all the blobs starting with sample. And I can say, this is what I can do. This is how granular my rule can be out here as such.
So
Yes, any questions?
if I have multiple rules with for multiple containers, let's say I have 5
Okay.
containers, each container has a different rule. Okay.
Okay.
So what would be the hierarchy? I mean, will it follow in an order? 1, 2, 3, 4 in the
No,
order it is there, or
you mean the application of the rule? You mean test container 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? The application
yeah,
of the
which
rule?
one will take? Yeah, which one will take first?
You mean where
Five
will it
five
apply the rule
containers are
first?
there.
Mm-hmm.
I have 5 containers, 1 to 5, and
Okay.
container 1 has a different rule, 2 has
Okay.
a different, 3 has a different, 4 has a 5 has a different rules,
Yes.
right? All containers have different blobs.
Yes.
So which, I mean, this is the order, 1 to 5 is the order I have.
Mm-hmm.
So the rules, lifecycle policies applies parallelly or sequentially from 1 to 5.
No, it's a parallel application.
Okay.
So it's a parallel application that let's say Microsoft does in the background. So it's a parallel rule block because see, for you and me, this is the rule block. or for you and me, this is how the rules look like. It's a sequential rule. But for Microsoft, right, this is not how it looks like. For let's say Azure, it looks like this. This is your entire rule block. It's a JSON body. It's a JSON object that it gives you. So it takes this entire rule, applies it on top of, let's say, a storage account out here. So this will become a parallel application. So we'll talk about again JSON files and all these things out. But it's a
And
JSON structure for let's say the Azure, let's say the servers out there that apply the rule out here as such. Mhm.
and for the blobs also it is the same thing. I mean, if within a
Yes.
container, if you have
Mhm.
rules for different blobs,
Correct.
that is also
It will be a
parallel.
parallel application. Yes, it's a parallel application there too.
Oh, okay.
Yes, any more questions, guys?
So Kiran, in the storage level, suppose it is 60 days. We have defined a rule as 60 days. Now on the
Okay.
container level, we defined a rule as 30 days. Which will be the priority? How it will
Container
work?
level will be your priority. So it will always look for a filter set. Container level will take the priority over, let's say, the storage level out here as such.
Okay, so as the container will be taking priority and it has 30 days filter, so automatically the storage rule will be vanished,
Overridden. Yes, so the
overwritten.
storage will be overridden out here by the container rule set out here as such.
I think the least one is will take the preference, right? If it is a
Uh,
storage container blob, blob will take
mhm.
preference.
Exactly. Blob will take a preference. That's correct. So it's always the most granular one will take the preference out here as such.
And these rules cannot be reversed, right? I think from archive to cold or hot.
No, it is from hot because your storage account is starting at hot because your entire storage account is having a hot out here. You created a hot storage. From there, you can either switch it back to cool or archive. The other way around is not possible. And if you need something like that, then you'll need to come with your custom scripts. Meaning you can write your own custom scripts and you can reverse it the other way as well as out there as such.
So which is JSON scripts, I mean, to invoke from
CLI or
archive to.
PowerShell. CLI or PowerShell that will support this particular rule object. Yes, you can also approach it with a JSON.
There could be use cases like that, right? A customer can ask, I mean, I want to
Of
retrieve.
course, definitely there can be use cases there. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, just a second. I'll just take a question offline and come to the online class. So yes, please go ahead. Yes. 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 Going into cool, correct. Yes. Archive, yes. Yes, it will go after 90. It will go after 90. So if you look at the rule, right, I said after creation, meaning today I created it. After 3 months, change it to let's say archive out there. Same log. Same log. Yes. Yes. Cool. No, no. So what this archive rule does is that the archive rule that you have right now is telling that please change it to archive if the days of creation is more than 90. So first what happens, today I created some blob in hot. The first rule comes into picture called rule 30. It'll change it to cool. So when it will change it to cool? November 10th. From November 10th again. Now your archive rule is not calculating from November 10th. It's calculating from October only because it's now calculated on the creation date. So it's telling if the date created is October 10th, I'll say October, November, December. 3 months is done. January 10th, I'll change it to hot. Yes. Yes. After 90, it'll go to this. Yes. Because the rule that we added here, right? Archive here is completely dependent upon the day of creation. Created more than 90 days. This day of creation will not change until you delete and recreate the blob. Until I go and delete the blob and recreate it, this won't change. This will be the same. Or the creation date, let's say this is the modified, fine. Yeah, internally you have a property called creation date also. So the date of creation will not change. The creation date will always be static until or unless you go and delete the blob and recreate it back again out here as such. Good, please. Okay. Okay. In that it will be mismatched. So your rule creation should be a little careful, meaning it shouldn't conflict with each other. That's something that you have to take care of. Yes. Any more questions here?
Hello, sir.
Good, please.
Sir, in life cycle, hello, sir. Life cycle management in
Okay.
container level,
Okay.
container one, container two, all those things in the particular storage account.
Okay.
Container one, I give hot to cold, I give 30 days. A container
Okay.
two, I give 40 days.
Yes. Okay.
Otherwise, container three, I give 15 days,
Okay.
which will convert into cold storage, particularly 30 days or 40 days or 50 days, similarly, simultaneously, sir.
No. This container will get converted into cool after 15. This will be converted
Okay.
after 30. This will be after, let's say, 40 and 30. So depending upon the rule that you're giving, Microsoft will constantly keep evaluating what is, let's say, the rule. And then it will tell you, okay, fine, what are the blobs? And then I'll start applying those rules out here as such. Yes. Any more questions here?
Sir, one more question.
Can you recover the deleted blob? Can you do that? Can you recover a deleted blob? Yes, no? You tell me. Generally, no, but what controls it? Can you recover a deleted blob? Yes, no? Yes. If you want to recover, what should you enable on the storage account?
Versioning.
What
Delete,
should
soft delete.
soft delete? Soft delete. Yes, there's something called soft delete that should be enabled. So depending upon the soft delete, what is the retention period? You can go ahead and recover the blob also.
So there is no
Trinath, sorry,
concept
you
of
had a
version.
question. The concept of versioning is also there. So for example, if you go inside this one, you have concept of versioning as well. So if you go into the storage account level, let's say data protection. Let's see data protection out here. Fine.
So versioning will not help to restore the deleted objects.
See, when you are deleting a blob, you're also deleting the versions of the blob. You're just not deleting an object, you're deleting the entire version of a blob out here. You can enable a version for tracking purposes on how the
Okay.
changes have actually been made on a blob out there. Versioning is for tracking, for the history of a blob. But when you delete something, it will also delete the version, or it will also delete the history of the same thing out there as such. So
Okay.
versioning will not help you to restore it,
Okay.
but
Okay.
soft delete will help you to restore it.
Okay. I think in AWS it is slightly different. Okay.
Okay.
So versioning can help something called delete marker or something like that. Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yes, any more questions here?
So Kiran, for all type block types, it is applicable, like page
I'm
block.
sorry. Can you? Sorry,
For
your
all
voice is a little. Yeah, good, please.
for all type of block types, like page block, it is applicable.
Okay,
Version.
good question. For all type of blobs, is it available? Let's see. So if you put a rule here, and let's see out. So it's only available for block and append blobs. The versioning, or let's say the your lifecycle management and etc. is only available for these two blobs. Page blob, it is not available. It is not available for a page blob out here as such, because
There is
page
some
blob is managed completely. Sorry.
no something like subtypes are there, right? I mean, what are those? Blob
It's,
subtypes.
yes, blob subtypes are there called block, page, and append. The three block subtypes that we are looking at, right?
No
When the very first
snapshots
start.
and if you go back to that,
To this one,
yeah. So you see
subtypes,
the
snapshot versions. Yeah, it's just telling. Do you want to just apply it for a base blob? Do you want to apply it for a version? Do you want to apply it for a snapshot of a blob? Meaning you want to take a backup and store it here, called snapshot out here as such. So do you want to apply it for versions, snapshots, and etc.? You can apply it out here as such. But normally we just go ahead and take a base blob out here as such, because once you put it for a base blob, you will get it applied both for the versions and snapshots out there as such.
So can you say that again? Versions are used for what? I mean, in here.
Versioning a blob. This is what you're talking about, right? Versioning is for tracking your history. Meaning, if I do a
Okay.
change onto the blob,
Okay.
you'll
Okay.
have a
Okay.
version 1 and version 2 that is saved in the background.
All right. All
So
right. Okay.
versioning, that's the versions of a blob out here.
Okay.
Yes. And one more thing that I want to now tell you is that, see, when you are dealing with a data, let's say I have a storage account right now, there is some data that I don't want to be deleted at all. Let's say, especially you're working for, let's say, something like a law firm. What does a law firm do? They file a lot of cases. They want those cases to be hold for a longer period of time because, of course, they want to go back for legal reasons and all these things out. When you're working with an auditing firm, they want to store the data for a longer period of time because they want to get it audited and all that stuff. In that cases, right, I don't want my lifecycle management policies to delete my blobs, or in general, I don't want my blobs to be deleted. That is where retention policies come into picture. Retention. So you have two things. Lifecycle management policies is to change the lifecycle or to delete a blob, because you are seeing that in a lifecycle management policy, you can add rule, you can keep in archive mode. But what if someone accidentally deletes it out? I'm telling not the rule. Yes. What if someone accidentally comes here and deletes it out? Some accidental deletions. I want to avoid that too. For which I have a retention policy that comes into picture. Retention policy. So two things. Life cycle management. Second is a retention policy that comes into picture. Life cycle management policies are generally called as deletion policies, because we normally use this to delete things out or to convert things out into, let's say, cool archive and etc. You also have something called as a retention policy. Where is retention policy coming into picture? Let's see. Let's say that in test container 2, I have one blob. Imagine that you have multiple blobs out here. You don't want blobs in this particular container to be deleted. Let's say for a period of 720 days because of your legal implications and etc. You can go into something called access policies on a container level, and these are only available for a container, not a blob, not a storage. These are to be applied on a container level out here. And you have something called immutable blob storage. When you generate, let's say, a shared access signature, and when you generate a shared access token, you see something called immutable storage out here. Immutable means something that you cannot kill or something that you cannot delete. Immutability. And when you say add a policy out here, you normally have something called legal holds and time-based retention policies out there. Let's go to time-based retentions and also give you the theory for legal holds. So I'll say time-based retention out there. Telling set a retention period. Let's say for 365 days, I don't want you to delete a blob, or I don't want you to, let's say, go ahead and do something like that. I'll say save. Now it says 365. It is unlocked. You can also come here. Be very careful while doing this. Again, I'm just giving you a heads up. If you have a free trial account, you can play around with that. Do not hit the lock button until and unless you're sure about it. If you hit a lock here, you cannot unlock your, let's say, storage account. You cannot unlock it. No matter you raise a Microsoft ticket, no matter what you do, you cannot unlock this. Your storage account will be locked out there. You cannot delete it. You cannot do anything. So when you are sure that you need this storage account for 365 days, you don't want to delete the data out there, you put a lock. Once you put a lock, you cannot delete this container. If you cannot delete this container, you cannot delete the storage account. If you cannot delete a storage account, you cannot delete the resource group itself. It gets applied that way. And these are time-based retention policies out here, which means that for 365 days, your storage account right now goes into something called WORM, WORM, write once, read many. Meaning, if you lock your storage account like this, if there is a blob called sample1, I cannot even update the blob. I cannot even update the blob once again. I can create, yes, sample2, I can create something, but I cannot update the sample2 again. It's called worm out here as such. So if you look at that particular, let's say, documentation, that's what it talks about. So if I click on the
So this
documentation out
is
here,
irrespective of the life
about,
cycle policies, right? I mean,
just a
any
second,
block.
I'm not finished. Just a second, just a second. Let's hold on. It's a second. Let's complete this and let's take the questions. This is what it tells you. Store business critical data with immutability. Immutable storage for an Azure storage account enables users to store business critical data in worm, called write once, read many state. While worm state data cannot be modified or deleted for a user, by configuring this policy, you can protect your data from overwrites and deletes. For data protection out here, advanced data protection out here. And then you have things like what is time-based retention, what is legal hold policies out here. I want you all to tell me what is legal holds. How is it different from something called as a time hold? Let's say a time-based retention out there as such. Yes, I'm going to take questions now.
The question is the objects. Sorry, the objects which we are setting it for worm compliance. So they are not. They are on the objects, right? Not on the life cycle policies.
When you say objects, see, when you put a worm compliance out here, you are applying it on top of a container, which
Container,
gets
yes.
applied to all the blobs that are there
All
inside
the
a
blocks.
container out here.
No, no.
Yes.
In the life cycle policy, let's say we have set
Mhm.
after 30 days, 90 days, and 180 days.
Yes. Yes.
After
Mhm.
archival, I mean, let's say we put it as a delete the object, delete the
Okay.
blob, right?
Okay.
So when we enable worm compliance on the container for the
Mm-hmm.
life cycle policy where we applied on, so
Yes.
that will, even though we set it as a delete after 190 days, it will not delete,
Yes.
right?
It will not delete. It will be invalidated. That policy will be invalidated by your access policy out here.
Okay. And there is one more option that we saw. I mean, it is a data protection. What does that do?
When you say data protection, okay,
The life cycle
this one.
policies just below, before screen. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, this is where we enabled our soft delete and all these things out. Meaning, if your blob get deleted,
Okay.
restore and all that stuff. So it's soft delete, versioning, and all these things out here as such.
Okay. And on the containers, if you go on the storage account
Mm-hmm.
level, so
Mm-hmm.
we have an option of turning it on the right side. Show deleted containers, deleted blobs.
Yes.
So if you
Yes.
enable that, so
So if
this
you just
works only
enable it, yeah,
when you enable the delete data protection, right?
correct. This works only when you enable data protection out here. Yes.
So otherwise we cannot see, I mean, deleted. It will be deleted
Yes.
completely.
Correct. It will be deleted completely. You won't be able to restore it back.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hi, Kiran. You are giving the retention interval, right?
Mm-hmm.
May I know the maximum days there's a limit. Is there any limitation for giving the days, like the 10 years, 20
No.
years, 40?
No, there is no limitation. You can give any number of period out here as such. Well, I work with organizations who are also giving 15 years of period out there because they need data compliance for the next 15 years and so on and so forth. Normally, banks do that. When you go ahead, take a bank account, right? They'll give you huge forms that, in that form, it'll also tell you that your data will be there for us, with 7 years or 8 years, something like that. So, yes, there is no limit out there as such. You can give any number of
Even
days.
insurance companies also does that. They retain the
Yes,
policies.
insurance companies, law firms, auditing firms. There are a lot of firms which implement this particular policy out here as such. And this also becomes one of the most important interview questions out there. That, what, I have a blob, I don't want to delete it for so and so period. What kind of, let's say, suggestions that you can give, or what kind of a policy that you can apply out here as such? That's where you can tell about, or you can talk about access policies or time-based retention policies and so on and so forth. Yes, any more questions, guys?
Legal hold, you said something. I mean, do we need to read that
Yes.
and come back?
Yes, please read that. You have in the documentation. I'll also share the link for this documentation. Please read that. Please let me know what is the difference between a legal hold and a time-based retention out here as such.
Okay, it says explicitly cleared until the hold is clear, it is not deleted. Okay.
Exactly.
Mhm.
So Kiran, here the public access level, if it is
I'm
private,
sorry. Mm-hmm.
here the public access level, right? If it is private, the last one is private, right? How will be
Correct.
the life cycle, life sciences? How will it will be, and also warm, right? How it work actually?
Again, this is
Private.
the access level. So there are two things out here that we shouldn't be confused about: access level and access tier. Access level defines how you can access the blob. Can you do an anonymous access or not? This is what access level decides. Access tier, on the other hand, tells you what is the cost that is associated with it. Meaning, is it hot, is it cool, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't say there's a lot of correlation between the access level and the access tier. Access level just defines how you can access. Access tier just tells you what kind of, let's say, cost is associated with this particular blob out here as such.
If it is
Yes,
private,
anymore.
all other users will not be able, right? Will not be able to see that, right? License life cycle
If it is
management.
private, no. The thing here is that if it is private, you won't be able to do an anonymous request to your blob. Meaning you can just cannot take the URL and access the blob out here, like the way I'm doing it here as such. Yes, any more questions here, guys? So again, from tomorrow we'll be starting with PowerShell. So the idea here is this, guys, is that firstly we'll be starting with the basics of PowerShell. We'll take the basics of PowerShell for the next 2 or 3 days out there, and most of the automation I would like to cover over a weekend, on a Saturday or a Sunday out there as such. So we will be doing, let's say, multiple weekends out here. Reason being, see, on a regular class hour, right, I don't feel the time is sufficient at all, because I'll have to go at a very, let's say, slower pace if I do automation, because I agree to the fact that a lot of people might not belong to the automation background at all. You might not even know what is a script. So I'll have to start from a very scratch out there. So we'll establish the basics and we'll continue our regular classes, theory classes, let's say on the weekdays. And on weekends, I would need around 3 or 4 weekends, like about 1.5 hours each day. So that would help me cover up the automation out there as such. So on automation front, again we'll be looking at creation of the storage account, creation of the resource groups, and etc., but by various techniques, by using something like Azure PowerShell, by using something like ARM templates, by using something like Terraform scriptings and all that stuff. So this is something that we'll be, let's say, working on over the weekends out there as such.
Same timings, right?
Sorry, coming in please.
That the time is the same timing.
Time, I will communicate about the time. Like, it would be
No, no.
in the morning only. It would either be 7 to 8 or 8 to 9, something like that. It would be in the morning slot only.
Yeah, okay. Not later than what we are doing, right? 8 to 9. I mean, because
Not later than what we are doing, yes. Not
okay,
later than what we are doing. Definitely earlier than what we are doing, but not later than what we are doing, yes.
okay, perfect. Okay.
Sir,
Go ahead, please.
సార్ ఇప్పుడు కంటైనర్స్ హాట్ నుంచి కూల్ కాకుండా కూల్ నుంచి హాట్ కూడా మార్చొచ్చా?
No, sir, you cannot do that. You cannot come from an archive to cool by using the policy. But yes, if you have your own scripts, then you can of course do that. But by using lifecycle management policy, the other way around is not possible. It's only from hot to cool or cool to archive or something like that, or archive to delete.
ఓకే సార్.
Yes, any more questions, guys? Okay, so that's it from my end today. We'll meet tomorrow and we'll start with automation. But so my request, guys, is please be a bit regular to the automation classes, because each and every class is interlinked with each other. So please be a little bit regular so that you can follow. If you have any questions, please make sure to send out emails, or you can ask it in the class hour or something. Thank you
I
and have
think
a good day ahead.
I think so far we covered user access management and storage, right?
Yes,
We
so
are yet
far
to
we
come.
covered user access management and storage,
We
and
yet
the
to cover
upcoming topics would
networking,
be into
compute.
networking. Yes, the upcoming topic would be into networking, infrastructure as services, like virtual machines and, let's say, disks of a virtual machine, load balancing, and after that we move into PaaS services, wherein we cover something like Azure App Service, SQL databases out here, and after that we move into DevOps. After that we go ahead into DevOps, and we try to see how do you manage the same thing using DevOps out here, using CI/CD pipelines and all these things out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you guys.